You wake up in the morning, and before you even get out of bed, your mind is already running. You're thinking about the thing you didn't finish yesterday, the conversation that didn't go the way you wanted, the bill that's coming, the decision you still haven't made, the future that keeps feeling just a little bit out of reach. And here's the strange part. Nothing has even happened yet. The day hasn't started. No one has called. No email has come in. No problem has actually landed in front of you. But you're already exhausted. You're already tense. You're already somewhere else in your mind, fighting a battle that hasn't begun. Does that sound familiar? Because if it does, this video is exactly where you need to be right now. What I'm going to share with you today isn't a list of motivational quotes. It's not just breathe advice. It's not a productivity hack. What I want to walk you through are 7 methods, rooted in one of the most battle-tested philosophies in human history, that will help you genuinely relax inside uncertainty, slow your mind down, and return to taking care of yourself with more calm, presence, and steadiness. And here's something I want to be upfront about. This isn't easy. None of this is. Because the world we live in is specifically designed to keep you anxious, to keep you refreshing, to keep you reacting, to keep you in a constant low-grade state of urgency that never quite resolves. And when you're living like that, you can't think straight. You can't rest fully. You can't be here. Because your mind is always somewhere else, bracing for something that may never even come. So if you're someone who feels like your inner life is louder than your outer life, if uncertainty makes your chest feel tight, if you've been running on empty and calling it being productive, stay with me. Because this conversation might be one of the most useful things you hear this week. And if this kind of content speaks to you, real, grounded, practical philosophy, consider subscribing. There's a lot more where this comes from. All right, let's get into it. Here's the belief most people carry around, completely unexamined. If I just figure everything out, I'll finally be able to relax. Think about how many people you know who live like this. They believe that peace is waiting on the other side of certainty, that once they know how the job interview goes, once they know if the relationship works out, once they know if the money comes through, then they can breathe. But look at what actually happens. One uncertainty resolves, and another one takes its place. There's always something unknown on the horizon. There always will be. And so the person waiting for certainty before they allow themselves to rest is a person who never rests. The ancient Stoics had a different relationship with uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who dealt with plagues, wars, betrayal, and the collapse of systems around him, wrote something in his private journal that I want you to really sit with. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Now notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, figure everything out first, and then you'll have strength. He said, realize where your power actually is. And here's what almost nobody understands about this. Uncertainty isn't the enemy of peace. Resistance to uncertainty is. Think about it like fog on a road. You can sit in your car and refuse to drive because you can't see far enough ahead. You can wait for the fog to lift. You can feel the panic rising because the road is unclear. Or you can drive carefully, slowly, with your lights on, and trust that the road continues even when you can't see the whole thing. The fog isn't the danger. The paralysis caused by the fog is what puts you at risk. This is the first shift. Not pretending the fog doesn't exist, not forcing fake confidence about the future, but choosing to move, gently, deliberately, even inside the uncertainty, trusting that you don't need to know the whole road to take the next step. What would change in your life this week if you stopped waiting for everything to become clear before you allowed yourself to feel okay? Sit with that. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you did absolutely nothing and didn't feel guilty about it? Not scrolling, not watching something while half thinking about your to-do list, not resting while mentally running through what you still need to handle. Actually, nothing. If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. We live in a culture that has made urgency feel like virtue. Being busy is the status symbol. Rushing is confused with ambition. And stillness, actual stillness, has become something people feel they have to earn. But here's the question the Stoics would ask: urgent, according to who? Epictetus, who started life as a literal slave and became one of the most respected philosophers of his time, taught that most of what we call urgent is simply noise that we've given permission to rule us. He said, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." What that means, in plain language, is this: your nervous system isn't responding to reality. It's responding to the story you're telling about reality. The email sitting in your inbox isn't causing you stress. Your interpretation of what that email means, what it might say, what it might require of you, how you might respond, that's where the stress lives. And this is crucial to understand, because once you see it clearly, you can start to work with it instead of being dragged around by it. Here's a simple practice that sounds almost too simple to work. And yet it's quietly one of the most powerful things you can do. When you feel that surge of urgency, that tightening in your chest, that pull to react immediately, pause, just for 3 seconds, and ask, is this actually urgent? Or does it just feel that way? Most of the time, it just feels that way. Most of what demands your immediate attention is not actually an emergency. It only has that quality because you've trained yourself to respond to noise as if it were fire. The Stoics called this prohairesis, the capacity to choose your response, to insert a pause between stimulus and reaction, and in that pause, that's where your freedom lives. Your nervous system will tell you, move, react, fix it now. Your wisdom will ask, does this actually require me right now, or am I just afraid of what happens if I don't react? Learning to hear the difference is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't come up enough in conversations about Stoicism, because people often hear Stoic and think cold, hard, emotionless. Like you're supposed to be a robot who feels nothing and soldiers on regardless. That's not Stoicism, that's just suppression with a philosophy tag on it. The real Stoics were deeply human. They felt grief, fear, anger, and uncertainty, just like you do. What they practiced was something different from suppression. They practiced not adding unnecessary suffering on top of the suffering that's already there. Think about what we do to ourselves when things get hard. Something difficult happens, and then immediately, almost automatically, we start judging ourselves for how we're handling it. Why am I so anxious? I should be stronger than this. I can't believe I'm still thinking about this. What's wrong with me? Other people handle this kind of thing fine. I'm falling apart over nothing. You see what's happening there? You're not just dealing with the original difficulty. You're now also punishing yourself for having the difficulty. You've created a second layer of suffering on top of the first. Marcus Aurelius, who, remember, was governing an entire empire while battling personal grief and chronic illness, wrote to himself, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But what's often missed is the other side of that. He also wrote about the importance of treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend who was struggling. Here's a question worth sitting with. If someone you loved came to you and said, "I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I don't know what's going to happen and I'm scared," would you tell them to stop being weak? Would you say, "You shouldn't feel that way"? Of course not. You'd sit with them. You'd acknowledge what they're feeling. You'd remind them that uncertainty is hard for everyone, that they're not broken, that they're just human. You deserve that same conversation from yourself. This is not softness. This is not an excuse to stop growing or to avoid accountability. It's the recognition that self-cruelty isn't discipline. It's just cruelty. And you cannot take care of yourself well if you're at war with yourself constantly. One of the 7 methods in this video is simply this. Practice noticing when you turn against your own mind and choosing, slowly, deliberately, to respond to yourself with the same steadiness you'd offer someone you care about. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. Let me tell you about a man I knew. I'll call him David. David was one of the most capable people I'd ever encountered. Sharp, driven, meticulous. He had a plan for everything. He worked 18-hour days. He built contingencies into his contingencies. He was, by every external measure, completely in control of his life. And then something happened that no plan could account for. His business partner, someone he trusted completely, made a decision that unraveled 3 years of work in a matter of weeks. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even malicious. It was just one human being making a choice that David hadn't seen coming. And David fell apart. Not because the situation was unsurvivable, but because he'd built his entire sense of safety on the belief that if he controlled enough variables, nothing would catch him off guard. When that illusion broke, everything felt like it broke with it. Here's what the Stoics understood about this, and it's one of the most important ideas in all of their philosophy. There is a fundamental division in the universe between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Epictetus called this the dichotomy of control, and he was absolutely uncompromising about it. Up to us, our thoughts, our values, our effort, our response to events, our character. Not up to us, other people's decisions, the economy, the weather, our reputation, our health to a large extent, the past, most of the future. Now, here's the part that catches people. The Stoics weren't saying, give up on the things outside your control. They weren't saying, don't try. They were saying, apply full effort while holding the outcome lightly. There's a practice Epictetus described called the reserve clause. You set an intention, you work toward a goal, but you add an internal footnote. I will do this if nothing prevents me. Not as resignation, as wisdom. Because the person who is devastated every time reality doesn't match their plan is the person who has made their peace conditional on circumstances cooperating. And circumstances will not always cooperate, but the person who gives their full effort and then releases the outcome, that person has something unshakable. They can lose the job and still be okay. They can face uncertainty and still move forward. They can have plans fall apart and not have themselves fall apart. David eventually rebuilt. But what changed wasn't his circumstances. What changed was the foundation he built on. He stopped trying to control everything outside himself and started focusing everything on what was actually his to shape. That's where the real stability lives. I want to say something that might sound almost radical in today's world. You are allowed to slow down, not as a reward for finishing everything on your list, not when you finally get ahead, not someday, now. You are allowed, right now, to lower the pace, to stop treating speed as the measure of your worth, to stop confusing being constantly in motion with actually moving forward. Here's what rushing actually does to you physiologically. When you're in a state of constant hurry, your body operates as if it's under threat. Your cortisol levels rise, your thinking narrows, your creativity drops, your patience shortens, your immune system weakens, your sleep quality deteriorates. You're not thinking more clearly when you're rushing. You're thinking faster, and fast thinking under stress is often wrong thinking. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius, who was, let me remind you, running the most powerful empire in the known world while conducting military campaigns, built deliberate slowness into his day. He woke early to write, to think, to ask himself questions, not to optimize, not to plan his schedule, but to orient his mind before the day could claim it. He understood something that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten. How you begin determines everything that follows. A morning spent in frantic reaction shapes a frantic day. A morning spent in quiet reflection, even just 10 minutes, shapes a different kind of day entirely. You don't need more hours. You need a different relationship with the hours you already have. Seneca, another Stoic who spent time in the wealthiest circles of Roman society, looked around at people with every resource imaginable and wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." The shortness of life, he said, is largely self-inflicted. We spend so much of it in hurry, in distraction, in things that don't matter, that by the time we look up, it's gone. So here's the method. Identify one thing in your day that you currently rush through, and tomorrow, do it slowly. Just one thing. Eat one meal without your phone. Have one conversation where you're fully there. Take one walk without trying to get somewhere. Not as a grand gesture. Not as a new lifestyle. Just as a small act of defiance against the tyranny of constant urgency. And notice what it does to your nervous system. Notice how different the air feels when you're not racing through it. That difference, that's what you've been missing. Here's something the human mind does that causes an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering. It collapses time. It takes the worries of the next 6 months and drops them all on today. It picks up the regrets of the past year and carries them into the present moment. It builds hypothetical futures, catastrophic what-ifs, and impossible problems that don't exist yet, and treats them as if they're happening right now. And so the person is never actually here. They're everywhere except the present moment. The Stoics had a name for the practice of returning to the present. Memento mori, the contemplation of mortality, not as morbid exercise, but as a constant, quiet reminder that this moment, right here, right now, is the only one that's real. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, just that, just now, not the week ahead, not the year, not the decade, now." This doesn't mean you don't plan. It doesn't mean you don't think about the future. It means you don't live in the future. You visit it for planning purposes, and then you return to where life is actually happening. Because the future is not where you have power. The future is not where your presence matters. The future is not where you can do anything useful. Now is the only time anything can actually be done. There's a practice I want you to try, borrowed loosely from Stoic discipline and refined over centuries of human experience. At the end of each day, ask yourself just 3 questions. What did I do today that aligned with who I want to be? What pulled me away from that? What do I want to carry into tomorrow? Not a full inventory, not a performance review. 3 questions, 5 minutes. This is how you stop living in a blur and start living with intention. This is how one day at a time stops being a cliche and becomes a genuine practice. Because you can't fix the whole year. You can't make up for lost months. You can't solve every problem in your life before dinner. But you can make today a little more conscious than yesterday. And enough days like that? That's a life. Last one. And I want to give this one the space it deserves. We live in a culture obsessed with intensity. Hustle harder, push further, feel more deeply, achieve bigger. The idea is that the person who wants it most, who suffers most, who sacrifices most, who burns most intensely, wins. And maybe in short bursts, intensity works. But as a way of living, as a sustainable relationship with your own life, intensity destroys. I've watched it happen over and over. People who were brilliant, capable, passionate, who pushed and pushed and pushed, and then one day just stopped. Burned out completely. Lost connection to the things that once mattered to them. Couldn't feel the joy they were working so hard to reach. The Stoics had a different ideal. They called it eudaimonia, a word usually translated as happiness, but which really means something closer to flourishing. Living well, being in harmony with your values and your nature. And the key to eudaimonia, in Stoic thought, was not intensity. It was virtue, character, steadiness, not the excitement of peaks, the reliability of the person you are in the valleys. Think about what actually makes a life feel good. not just occasionally but consistently. It's not the moments of triumph. Those are real, and they matter, but they're brief. What makes life feel livable, genuinely livable, is equilibrium. The ability to meet a hard day and not be destroyed by it. The ability to feel fear without being ruled by fear. The ability to want things deeply without needing them to arrive on schedule. That's the Stoic ideal. Not a life without difficulty, but a self that doesn't shatter under difficulty. Seneca wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." Now, and here's where people misread this. He wasn't talking about low expectations. He wasn't saying don't want more. He wasn't saying don't grow or reach or build. He was talking about the ability to be in the right relationship with what you have right now, to not have your peace held hostage by what hasn't arrived yet. Because the person who cannot be at peace until they have what they want will never be at peace. There will always be another thing, a bigger goal, a further threshold. Equilibrium is the recognition that peace is not a destination. It's a practice. A daily, quiet, unglamorous practice of returning to steadiness, not perfect happiness. Not artificial calm, just the willingness to stay rooted, to breathe, to keep going, with less chaos inside than yesterday. That's worth more than any achievement. That's worth more than any amount of speed. I want to leave you with a story. There was a Stoic teacher, one of the most influential in history, who was sold into slavery as a young child. He grew up with no freedom, no rights, no certainty about tomorrow. His name was Epictetus, and his master once broke his leg deliberately as a demonstration of power. Epictetus reportedly looked at his master and said, calmly, "You're going to break it." And when it broke, he said, "Didn't I tell you?" Now, I'm not telling you this story to romanticize suffering. His circumstances were genuinely cruel and unjust. I'm telling you this story because of what Epictetus understood, even in that moment, that something in him could not be broken. Not his opinions, not his values, not the way he chose to meet the world, not the quality of his attention and his character. Those were his, completely, regardless of what was done to his body or his circumstances. And he spent the rest of his life, after he was eventually freed, teaching others that same thing. That the deepest part of you, the part that decides what things mean, the part that chooses how to respond, the part that holds your values, is beyond the reach of circumstances. You may not control the storm, but you control how you stand inside it. You may not control uncertainty, but you control whether you become uncertainty, whether you let it colonize your whole inner life. You may not control what happens to you, but you control day by day, breath by breath, whether the person you are is someone you recognize. So here we are, 7 methods. Stop fighting the fog. Learn to move inside uncertainty. Recognize the tyranny of the urgent, and learn to pause before you react. Be gentle with your own mind, because self-cruelty isn't discipline. Release the illusion of control, and apply full effort while holding outcomes lightly. Slow down. The world will not fall apart if you lower the pace. Live one day at a time, and let the present moment be enough. Choose equilibrium over intensity, because the person who stays rooted outlasts the person who burns. None of this is about becoming perfect. None of this is about arriving somewhere. This is about the daily, quiet, courageous choice to take care of yourself. Not someday, not when things settle down, but now. The Stoics didn't believe that peace was a reward for the disciplined few. They believed it was available to anyone willing to look honestly at where they were spending their inner energy and to redirect it toward what actually matters. What would it look like if you applied even one of these 7 ideas this week? Not all 7, just one. Which one would make the most difference for where you are right now? I want to know. Leave a comment below. Tell me which one landed for you, or tell me what's been taking your peace lately. I read these. I think about them. And sometimes those conversations shape the next video. If this reached something real in you today, share it with someone who needs it. A friend who's running too fast, a family member who hasn't slowed down in months, someone who forgot that it's okay to breathe. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content I'm going to keep making. Rooted in real philosophy, applied to real life. No hype, no shortcuts, just honest, grounded conversations about how to live better. Subscribe, stay close, and remember, you don't have to figure everything out today. You just have to take the next step. That's enough.